Bulletcast for life.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Under the Radar. My name is Brandon, and yes, I know it's been a couple weeks since we've done an actual Under the Radar episode. I did the instant analysis for the NXT Takeover show a couple weeks ago. I did not do one last week. The Bulletcast episodes have kind of been all over the place on the days, so it was kind of hard for me to find out which day I wanted to do it to not be able to step on the toes of the Bulletcast and try to find enough news to cover in a show. And I just started school this week, so I wanted to, soak up summer for one last time before I had to go back to school. So I think now that school has started for both Philip and I think we're consistently going to be doing a podcast for the Bulletcast on Friday, the regular episode. And the way my schedule works out, Tuesdays I don't have any class, so I think Tuesdays is a nice little fit for the Under the Radar show. I can talk about the news that happened after the podcast aired, some of the stuff that happens on during the weekend. Not going to talk about Raw or preview SmackDown because obviously I'm not going to preview a show that by the time some of you listen to this has already happened. And we're just going to save Raw and SmackDown for the Bulletcast, the main show. So obviously Under the Radar, we try to talk about some of the news we don't talk about on the main show. Maybe some breaking news that just happened. But we're actually going to talk about Impact. The very first time I think we've ever talked about Impact, at least on this show. I don't even know how many times we've ever talked about Impact in general on the regular show. But this one, it's not a good reason why we're talking about this. There was an angle on Impact Wrestling last week where the OG LAX and the current version of LAX have been kind of going through a gang warfare. I've been sort of paying attention to Impact. Kind of know what's going on. I know they've been doing some good things. They're definitely kind of going all in, so to speak, since that is probably the theme of this week. In terms of like the blood and guts type aspect of pro wrestling, their last pay-per-view they just did, I think it was Slammiversary, they had a lot of blood, a lot of hardcore style matches. And if that's what people like and that's what gets the views, I mean, I'm not a big fan of hardcore blood and guts matches. I am a fan of blood in wrestling. I think it should be used sparingly, especially with like on indie shows. I don't think you should be having blood intentional on shows just because I don't think, especially all we know about blood-borne pathogens and all the other stuff that can happen, transmitting blood and stuff like that. I think big companies like Impact and WWE, and even ROH, I think you can take steps and you can test all your talent, especially the ones you want to have the match get blood in it. You can have the mats be cleaned off. I mean, WWE, I don't even know how many mats they use per show, but they're always switching them out. Maybe even, I think definitely during like the women's match because they get a lot of makeup on the mat and that gets it even dirtier. But on the last week's Impact show, they have the gang warfare of LAX against the OGs, and there was a segment where the current version of LAX was celebrating with their homies on the block, and one of the OG members, I wasn't really paying attention. I'm not the biggest Impact historian, so I don't exactly know who it was, but somebody was driving the car, and LAX's gang or whatever friends were walking across the street, and the guy went to go drive down the street, hauling ass, and he ran over and apparently killed a kid. I mean, he ran the kid over. The kid was like, all his arms were flailed up in the air, and then they go to the camera switches to the angle of what the kid would be looking at through his eyes, and all the people are like telling him to wake up and are you okay? They've done stuff like that in WWE where they switch the camera angle to where it's supposed to be like, through the eyes of somebody. And I'm not a big fan of that because wrestling is supposed to be real. It's not supposed to be, a sitcom or some sort of other television that you see that they kind of admit that it's scripted. WWE and wrestling in general, we know it's scripted, but they're supposed to take itself seriously like what New Japan does. There's not really any angles like this in New Japan, which Chris Jericho brought some sort of the WWE American style of wrestling to New Japan, but I'm just not a big fan of this angle just because, I mean, it just takes the reality out of it. Why would they kill a kid on the show and then you come back to the studio show, at the studio aspect of Impact, and then they just act like nothing happened. We don't get any update on the kid. There's no police being called. There's nothing going on. It's just you try to go with the shock factor, which I think is what Impact is doing sometimes, especially not lately. And I think it just completely missed the mark here. I'm not a big fan of killing children on TV, especially on a wrestling show. I don't think you want to go. I mean, the LAX OG feud has been kind of gang warfare. It's been like really ultra violent. And as I said, to each his own. If that's what you like, go ahead and do it. If it's getting viewers, if it's making any money, I don't know exactly how much money is Impact making at the time. But I'm just not a big fan of that, especially when it comes to serious crimes being committed on a wrestling show. There's always aspects. I mean, I talked about it when Roman Reigns ran over Braun Strowman in the ambulance. I was like, why? He just committed vehicular manslaughter. Braun Strowman should be dead. But then, of course, we play for laughs, and Braun Strowman no sells it the day after, a week after. And I just don't like, crimes being committed on wrestling to that extent. I mean, you can do kidnapping. That's kind of like I don't know if I'd say the limit, but that's kind of like maybe the farthest I think you can go that's being believable. But I mean, you can do assaults and obviously stuff like that, just physical stuff, keep it between the wrestlers. But once you try to kill somebody, that kind of just takes you out of the moment, and it's like, why would you do that? And is anybody going to face any repercussions? And probably no one's going to face any repercussions because it's a gang warfare. They don't want to call the cops, and maybe the cops look into them and they get in trouble. But that's it for Impact. Let's stick to some other stuff that we normally talk about on the show. That's New Japan coming up on what day is it? On October 5th, or no? On September 30th, the New Japan will be returning to Long Beach with Fighting Spirit Unleashed. And that is taking place, the show is taking place live on September 30th, but the news coming out is that Access will air it live, or on tape delay, on October 5th, which is the next Friday. So this is the first American show that Access is not going to cover live. Jim Ross will be on commentary, as well as Kevin Kelly. Josh Barnett has a scheduling conflict. I think one of his fighters is doing something over in Japan, so that's why he is unable to be by Jim Ross's side and maybe protect him from Jay White's shenanigans. I don't know what to make of this. Is this a big deal? Is this saying this isn't the biggest show, so Access doesn't want to put the effort into making the live broadcast? I don't know exactly the difference of amounts between airing it live and airing it on delay. Obviously, live is much more expensive because you have to pay for the satellites and everything to do it live. But I mean, I don't feel there's not a lot of hype on this show. There's going to be the Juice Robinson Cody match for the U.S. Championship. We have the Guerrillas Destiny going up against the Young Bucks for the Tag Team Championships, and then we have a semifinal tournament for to crown the new junior heavyweight, the junior champion. Marty Scurll and Will Ospreay will face off in Long Beach for the junior heavyweight championship semifinal. And those are probably the big three matches, and everything else is just going to be the big names and tag matches, kind of like what happened at the Cow Palace and the other Long Beach shows that have happened in the past. But Access TV, I think it's always good to get New Japan on Access TV. I think it's a good deal. It's a good way to get the people who maybe don't know about New Japan World or New Japan in general, to get them to watch something and get them to possibly be a fan for, maybe not even a subscriber to the network, but just watching the show constantly on a regular basis. And if, as I said, for Impact, as long as that show gets viewers and it makes money, it's a good sign for New Japan, and hopefully they can make some inroads. I mean, we already know they're going to run the Madison Square Garden show head-to-head with NXT on WrestleMania weekend. Maybe they try to go maybe farther, I don't know, east or west, however the way you want to look at it, because technically the MSG show is kind of an ROH and New Japan show, but mainly a New Japan show, let's be honest, because that's like the big names that are going to be there. But we haven't seen anything happen besides the MSG show outside of California for New Japan, so maybe they can hit up some of the bigger cities like Chicago, Houston, Louisiana. You can go down to Florida, do something there. but just travel and all that other stuff, getting almost an entire company to go from Japan all the way to Middle America, that's going to be very expensive. So that is it for that. On to the bread and butter of the show, the NXT TV report and the Miz and Mrs. recap. We have the day at or the week after the NXT Takeover event. So nothing real big happening on the show. Just 2 matches and a lot of video packages and some backstage interviews on the matches. So definitely a show you don't have to see. You're not going to miss much. There was a very good UK Championship match between Pete Dunne and Zach Gibson. We will get into that right now. So first off, they go over the show. They go over the entire Brooklyn card, what happened. They do the video package, and they talk about that. Then Bianca Belair versus Deonna Purrazzo. Bianca Belair started off with the ring entrances. Comes across great. She has great swagger. Seemed like she was over with the crowd. And she ends up beating Deonna Purrazzo in 5 minutes and 30 seconds. Purrazzo, she's a decent talent, but definitely Bianca Belair is one of the top female wrestlers in NXT at the moment, so no surprise here that she won. Purrazzo kind of going through a little bit of a transformation, and nothing much to the match. Bianca Belair has great athleticism. She's a great athlete, still a little green in the ring, but I think right now her athleticism is able to cover up for some of the poor striking and some of the other basic wrestling moves that she's not able to, or not basic wrestling moves, but basic elements of wrestling that she isn't completely dialed into. But she has a great personality and great athleticism to where it can cover up for some of her deficiencies in the ring. But definitely going forward with Bianca Belair, or with Kairi Sane being the new NXT Women's Championship champion, we got to see what happens with her and Shayna Baszler. Also, that happened on NXT. Over the weekend, Shayna Baszler tagged up with Marina Shafir and the debuting Jessamine Duke. So all 4 women in the MMA version of the 4 Horsemen have wrestled in WWE and made their debuts thus far. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with those 3 down in NXT. Obviously, Marina Shafir and Shayna Baszler, or Jessamine Duke, not Shayna Baszler, are going to have to maybe get a little bit more seasoning, have to wrestle on the not Florida indie scene, but the Florida NXT scene, because definitely there's the traveling NXT crew that will go to the big cities, go up through the East Coast, they go to the West Coast, Midwest, and everything like that. There's always the NXT crew that goes in around the Florida area, the local Florida area. There's always 1 or 2 big stars, like Shayna Baszler probably was like one of the biggest stars on the show. Maybe there would be like a Ricochet or a Velveteen Dream or something like that, but they're not going to just stack everything up on those Florida shows. Those are definitely the shows. If you're down there and an NXT show comes to like your little small town in Florida, and they just run, I don't exactly know where they run. I think they just kind of run like high school gyms and just like a real indie feel. Definitely that's a cool show to go to. It's not going to be the best wrestling you're ever going to see, but it's just nice, and it's a cool thing to go see the WWE. Like, that's the real WWE developmental system. See people who are, just getting their characters underway, just trying to learn how to wrestle, get the basics down. As I said, the matches might not be pretty, but you can say, like, I was there when this person made their debut, and now they're on the main roster. And definitely, I think the 4 horsewomen of MMA are definitely going to all collectively be up in WWE, possibly within the next year. Still no word on how long Ronda Rousey is contracted with WWE, but Survivor Series is always has always been a date where you can get the 4 horsewomen match. But right now, the way Becky Lynch has turned heel, she's against Charlotte. Doesn't look like that match is gonna, at least at the moment, where you have 2 months to get that match underway, and maybe kind of, I don't know if you would actually want to get Charlotte and Becky Lynch back together and have Becky and team up with the other 4 horsewomen, unless if it's like, the enemy of the enemy is my friend. But then I don't know. Unless if Becky feuds with them, and then she has to begrudgingly has to team up with Charlotte to face the MMA 4 horsewomen, and then maybe you can do some sort of dissension there. But in WWE, 2 months is a long ways away, and what Vince says, if he doesn't remember it, nobody else remembers it. So there might be some things happening there. But back to the NXT TV that happened last week. There was the Velveteen Dream EC3 recap. Kathy Kelly was backstage with Dream, and nothing was really said. Uh, let's see, what did Velveteen Dream say? He takes his entrance crown and he put it on Kathy Kelly's head. He asked Queen Kathy what she's doing on Wednesday, and she said nothing. He told her that she can watch the WWE Network at 8 p.m. to find out like everybody else. So it was kind of awkwardly worded because we're technically watching the Wednesday after at 8 p.m. that he was talking about, but I think what he meant was, next or, tomorrow when I'm recording this on the Wednesday. So on Raw, they set up a commercial for NXT, and there's going to be Ricochet and Pete Dunne going up against Undisputed Era. So obviously we know that tag team match happening. I do not look at any of the NXT spoilers, so I do not know what's going on. I know there have been some things that have gone down, but I do not want to know what exactly happened. So next up, Mike Rome talks to EC3. EC3 talks about how it was a clash of personalities and says that Dream was the better man tonight. He says that they made a lot of claims and promised a string of victories. Being the top 1% is about a mindset, not dollars, and he vows that this isn't the end. Rome asked EC3 about what he saw the night Aleister Black got attacked. EC3 saw a lot of things, but he put most of the suspicion on Lars Sullivan since Lars Sullivan's jaw was broken by Aleister Black, and he said that Lars Sullivan was there at the scene, and obviously he has the most reasons to attack Aleister Black. So next up, we have highlights of the Undisputed Era defending the NXT Tag Team Championships against Mustache Mountain. An interviewer talked to Ricochet. Kyle O'Reilly and Roderick Strong started yelling at him. The UK champion Pete Dunne shows up and gets them away. Ricochet thanks Dunne. Dunne says he doesn't like Ricochet that much and says Ricochet isn't a champ. He just has some gold that Dunne wants. So this definitely set up the tag team match that's happening this week. Some dissension between Ricochet and Pete Dunne. Pete Dunne obviously is not he's a babyface, but he's kind of the badass babyface where he doesn't really care all that much about other people. So possibly setting up a champion versus champion feud. I think Ricochet and Pete Dunne would be a great match down the line. Obviously, I'm going to the LA Takeover, so I wouldn't be. I would love to see a Ricochet Pete Dunne match, but I don't think that would happen. I think Ricochet is definitely gonna have a match at Takeover, possibly Pete Dunne. I think Pete Dunne might even be in the War Games match where you do Mustache or British Strong Style up against Undisputed Era with maybe one other person or another tag team or something like that. Next up, there was new footage on Black's attack after Detective Descard enhanced the video. Nikki Cross is seen at top of the roof looking at the aftermath of the attack. Video package of Zach Gibson. He called himself a throwback to the original British Strong Style, so it's definitely building him up for the championship match later on in the day. The recap of Kairi Sane defeating Shayna Baszler to get the NXT Women's Championship. They go backstage with Shayna Baszler, Ronda Rousey, Jessamine Duke, and Marina Shafir all together, and Baszler says that Kairi Sane didn't win, Baszler just lost. It wasn't Sane's skill, and Baszler is the better fighter. So definitely the heel making excuses, saying that Kairi Sane isn't better than her. She just messed up, and she's definitely gonna get her championship back one day. Then there was a very long video package on the Last Man Standing match between Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. They played up the injury to Johnny Gargano's knee, even on a conference call after the show. I know Triple H kind of talked about, he kind of played up the storyline, if it is a storyline, of Gargano getting hurt. He said they had to change the finish on the fly. Obviously, I think Ciampa was going to win regardless, but I think they had to maybe cut some of it short. So that also plays in to what happened. The Triple H conference call was not on the NXT TV show. I know about it through my sources about the conference call. So further speculation about what's going on with Gargano and his knee. We're going to have to stay tuned to see what happens in the coming weeks on the NXT TV taping. They speculated that Gargano's knee has been dislocated. So then they show a overall SummerSlam week in New York video. Ricochet and Dunne. They announced the tag team match for this week with Ricochet and Dunne facing O'Reilly and Roderick Strong. Zach Gibson makes his ring entrance, and then followed by Pete Dunne. Pete Dunne was hugely over to the NXT crowd in Brooklyn. Really good match. Overall, it goes 13 minutes and 40 seconds. Outstanding match. I believe these matches happened before the actual takeover, so definitely happened right before the show started, so definitely is a good sort of opener to get the crowd really hot. Great matches. Great match back and forth between the two. Let's see, I'll just read this this final paragraph of the match. Let's see. Dunne rolls up Gibson into the ring. Gibson tries to beg him off. Dunne delivers a double stomp, sit-out power bomb, and for the 2.5, Dunne tries to leap over Gibson in the corner. Gibson catches him with a kick, then hits the Ticket to Ride, a code breaker from the top. Not quite good enough for the win. Gibson had blood in his mouth. He tells Dunne it's over, but Dunne has chops, then blocks the throat thrust and muscles Gibson's hands to the mat to stomp on them. Then he kicks him in the face. The Ticket to Ride from Gibson. Then they trade a few identical moves, and they're both down. They trade offense in the corner. Dunne goes for the superplex. Gibson transitions into a corkscrew gourd buster of sorts, which is good for a 2 count. Gibson puts on one of his holds, but then Dunne blocks it. Gibson rolls Dunne around and locks the gates in, which is his finishing maneuver submission. Dunne was able to reach for the ropes and biting it to the escape. I don't know. I didn't write this. I'm just reading off my boy Wade Keller, even though I don't think this was his report, but it's off PW Torch, you know what I'm saying? Dunne had blood in his mouth. Dunne crawls to his mouth guard. Gibson steps on his hand, grabs the mouth guard, and he hits a brutal clothesline. Dunne is out in the corner. This is when Gibson picks up the mouth guard, looks at it, and he's gonna throw it to the crowd, but Dunne blocks it, breaks or snaps his fingers, and he hits the bitter end for the win. So as I said, 13 minutes and 39 seconds, great match. Definitely, the week after NXT, it's always just a couple matches like this, then a lot of video packages. Definitely the video packages aren't a lot to see, but I think definitely you can fast forward through the entire thing, watch the last 15 minutes of the show, and catch this match. Just quick, simple way, especially if you're on the move and crunch for time. Definitely, I wouldn't recommend watching the whole show, especially if you watch the takeover. But the match between Pete Dunne and Zach Gibson was fantastic. So next up, and finally, we have the Miz and Mrs. Report from the last 2 weeks. We have 2 episodes to cover, and the one couple weeks ago was a very big episode because Monroe Sky has been born, ladies and gentlemen. As we talked about earlier, Maurice has to get a C-section because she had back surgery, so obviously the doctors don't want to put her body in that sort of risk and that sort of pressure with her back and having to push it out the traditional way. You know what I'm saying? So Maurice wasn't feeling so hot. Apparently her water broke, but she didn't actually know it. She didn't feel it, I guess. I mean, I don't know how you don't know your water broke, but they went to the doctor and then they found out that she's in labor. So then, I don't know, 12 hours later, 16 hours later, she finally goes through the procedure. She has Monroe Sky with Mike there. Definitely heartwarming moment. It's always, emotional when they have the baby being born episodes. Those are always the tentpole episodes, you might say. So, I mean, Miz and Mrs. is only a half hour long, so that was basically the main point of the show. And then on the next episode, they've gone over moving to Austin. They kind of started going through the process. We talked about it the first episode where Maurice really wanted to get a private jet, but Mike was able to talk her down to just getting a tour bus, kind of like what John Cena has and Randy Orton, other bigger stars. And the whole episode was just the road trip going from LA to Austin, Texas. The road trip started off swimmingly because the bus was too big to go up the street to get to Maurice and Miz's house. So Maurice, Miz, and Maurice's mom had to walk with the baby and some dogs and some cats, had to walk up a hill and go down and, drop all their stuff off. They didn't actually say how many times they had to do this. They just showed once, so maybe that's all they had to do because they were able to, they had to tow the trucks. They had to put the cars away, so they get towed over to Austin. They had the movers. So basically, the tour bus was only to move the people, the animals, and some essential stuff that they wanted to take with them. The Miz and Maurice, they were definitely behind schedule. Miz said he was on a very tight schedule because he had to meet the movers by like 9 a.m. I think like 2 days later. I think the original plan was for it to be like a 16-hour drive. It took over a day, over 24 hours, I believe. The Miz and Maurice's mom were having some back and forths. They take a pit stop, and Maurice's mom had to go to the bathroom. So the Miz said to the drivers because obviously Miz and Maurice are going to drive this. They had their own bus drivers to drive them everywhere. So they tell them just kind of drive around the corner just to move to where they originally parked to think that they left her. And she gets pissed off and she hits Mike a little bit, and they laugh it off and they go down the road. Apparently the bus smelled like dog and cat and baby, so not a good combination. I think they got like 2 dogs, at least 1 cat, and a baby. So the smell is going to be atrocious, especially being stuck in that thing for over 16 to 20 hours. The Miz didn't know where to put a dirty diaper, so he decided to freeze it. So Miz always the smart one and thinking of new ways to, I don't know, stop the stench of baby smell. So they make another pit stop, and Maurice's mom had to go to the bathroom again, and Maurice thought that she was going to the bathroom in the bus, but instead she was going out to the, I don't know, whatever restaurant or, bus stop that they had. And so they go down the road, and they didn't exactly say how long this thing took, but apparently they left Maurice's mom, and she was not happy. And of course, another pit stop, then the bus breaks down, and then they have to rent like a Cadillac or something, and they drive them for like the next 2 hours to Austin. And they barely meet the movers in time, but we don't actually see the house, but that will be the next episode where Maurice and Miz and the whole gang finally moves to Austin, and they've been running commercials on Raw. And definitely they'll do it on SmackDown because it happens right after SmackDown, where they will be, apparently the Miz and Maurice are going to be full Texans. They're going to be roping bulls and all this other fun stuff. One quick thing before I bid you adieu. There have been some matches announced for the Melbourne show, as well as a match next week for Raw. The Bella Twins seem to have made a comeback. They were at Rochester, New York on Sunday. They were on Raw on this Monday, but then next week we will have the Bella Twins going up against the Riot Squad. So a big match. Obviously, there's been speculation about what the main event of Evolution will be. People saying it's going to be Ronda Rousey versus Nikki Bella, which is one of the reasons why the Bella Twins have came back at SummerSlam. We had Trish Stratus come back, so definitely they're laying the groundwork for what's going to be going on in Evolution. The Bella Twins, don't exactly know the reason why they just kind of came back all of a sudden. I guess it's good to see that Nikki's neck is healed to wrestle again. Obviously, I think Bree's going to wrestle most of it and then get the hot tag to Nikki. She cleans house, powerhouse. And obviously, my prediction is the Bella Twins win against the Riot Squad next week. But for the Melbourne show, once again, the Bella Twins will take on the Riot Squad, but this will be a 6-woman tag match, and the person teaming with the Bella Twins will be none other than the Raw Women's Champion, Rowdy Ronda Rousey. So possibly that might set up the match between Nikki and Ronda down the line. This, of course, is taking place on October 6th, I believe, and that is about 2 to 3 weeks before the Evolution pay-per-view, so they could run an angle on this or do something else, or obviously they're going to build to this match on Raw, maybe some sort of dissension, but on Raw this week, it seemed like the Bella Twins and Ronda and Natalya are all one big happy family, so maybe even it builds to just a Bella Twins versus Ronda and Natalya tag team match. I don't know what the main event of the whole show will be. We're going to have to find out. Right now, WWE's building up 3 shows at once. You got Hell in a Cell, you got the Super Showdown in Melbourne, and you have the Evolution pay-per-view going on. So a lot of moving parts all at one time. A little bit confusing, but, especially right now with all these matches being announced, it can get confusing, but that's why I'm here, to set everything straight. So, the abbreviated version of Under the Radar, only a half hour. But next week we're going to have a actual show we're gonna have an actual, real NXT show to cover, so a lot more to talk about there. Mae Young Classic coming up. I'm gonna try to get on top of that and try to watch the matches, and we will cover that. Obviously, the Mae Young Classic's already been taped, so if you know it, don't spoil it. Be a nice person, and yeah. So thank you guys very much for listening. Make sure to follow the Bulletcast on Twitter and Instagram, and make sure to email us at bulletcast2sweet. That is the number 2. So yeah, make sure to email us questions. I love the fan mail segment, to be honest, because it's a part of the thing at the part of the podcast that I have no idea what's going to happen. So you get my honest reaction to it. I love the people who send in questions, but obviously different opinions and different people sending in questions are always good to keep a nice flow of questions coming in, not to get stale or always the same people, because we want to give the opportunity to everybody available. You don't just have to email us questions You can also, DM us. You can comment questions on our Instagram page, which is definitely where we're most active, I guess. You can also slide in the DMs on Twitter. But anything, have any comments, concerns, questions about the podcast, definitely hit us up. Bulletcast2, that's the number 2, sweet at gmail.com. So goodbye and good night, everybody. Bye.